my talk. Here we go. He said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. Hope you had an amazing weekend. The world feels like it's on fire, but we're not even going to get to that today because today is just a normal episode. We'll save that for Thursday trends, right? That's all we can do. Today I want to talk about a book I've been reading, and I want to kind of share, I guess, what I've been stewing on as I've been reading it. The book is called The Happy High Achiever: Finding Joy Beyond Success. And I think a lot of people on this podcast, myself included, a lot of people listen to this podcast. I'm the only one on the podcast, but we are high achievers to a fault. And it is an incredible gift as it pertains to often making things happen and getting results. It's a curse as it pertains to our own sanity and happiness. And it's something that I continue to struggle with. And I find it difficult to maintain a balance between like being disciplined and focused and busting my ass and working towards all my goals and everything, and then also just burning myself out and being miserable along the way. So I started reading this book, and it talks about, I guess, what it really means to be successful, what it really means to be happy, but also how to sort of reprogram your brain to get out of the toxic perfectionist mindset that oftentimes makes us miserable. And I don't know, man. I'm still in the midst of reading it, but I like to kind of share, what I'm going through, what I'm stewing on, or what I'm working through here on the pod. And I just found it to be super relevant for I think so many of us who are demanding more out of ourselves, but like, man, have a hard time not beating the shit out of ourselves along the way. So I want to kind of touch on that. We're just going to kind of dive into it. I'll give you kind of a rundown of it all. I guess the background of the book a bit and the idea of being a high achiever. And then I'll give you kind of my own personal anecdotes as I usually do when I'm in this segment. But first, let's do a bit of a deep dive in a segment called For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so let's define the traits that define a high achiever, I should say, right? And they talk about the idea of how these are people who are driven. They are often the perfectionist type. They are often tied to results. People who seem to have everything but often feel empty. And I resonate with that so fucking much. It's like the idea of being alone while surrounded by people. And I think often I recognize it in other people as well, in perfectionists, right? And I'll give you a quick anecdote. I know I was going to say that for the mi gente, but an anecdote about somebody else, a really talented DJ friend of mine who's been dabbling in production. And I kind of had a pep talk with them around this time last year, sort of about how much of a waste it would be if they didn't really make the most of their talents, because they're a very talented DJ, um, and have great taste, and I've seen them kind of dabbling in music production and things like that. And there's somebody who has made it clear that they want to take their music career to the next level, but have nothing to show for it in terms of music stuff, right? And I know it's not a lack of talent. Like I said, I think I know what it is, basically, right? I'm looking at them, talking to them. They're getting in their own way, like so many of us do. And it's a perfectionist mindset, right? And this person, I had that talk with them, and they kind of told me after the fact, like, man, you were super inspiring, and like it lit a fire under me, to the point where they finally put out like a remix, and all of a sudden one of their favorite artists was playing it like at a huge event, right? And it's a beautiful thing to see, but since then, they haven't been able to be consistent about it. And, from the outside looking in, we often write a lot of people off, or it's easy to write people off. It's like, oh, well, they're being lazy, they're being this, they're being that. And what I've come to realize, because I recently had hit up this person, like, hey, I have this idea for a song. I basically sent them a song that was like pretty much done. Like, I'd say 70% done, 60 to 70% done. We'll call it 70% writing wise done. Probably more, to be honest with you. But I was like, you know what? I want to like be very collaborative. Want to be, you know, working with people I like, and they have great taste. So I was like, a couple things that I'm unsure of, they could probably help me out with. Sent it to them, and and I told them kind of my deadline of like, I want to have this done by like the end of January, and be able to start, kind of sending it around and seeing what people's potential interest could be, and get into this week. So then I kind of gave up on them, right? And then randomly, they hit me up like last week, and were like, "Hey, I'm working on it now. I have something to send to you soon." And at this point, I had already sent it out to another DJ producer friend of mine who literally within days sent me an idea back. And basically within the next week, we had like a finished product, and a close to finished product. And then, of course, the original friend of mine hits me like, "Hey, I'm working on it today. I'm going to send it to you," like I said. And I had to be real, like, "Hey, I've already kind of moved past it and have an idea that I'm pretty excited about that we're about to finish up on. But, feel free to send it to me." But what I recognize is, because it was easy to be like, "This is what you get," whatever. I know this kid. I know he is a extreme perfectionist, and in doing so, got in his own way. I'm not saying like this would have been a life-changing situation. Could be, couldn't be. We don't know yet. What I'm saying is, though, the perfectionist in him had him drag his feet, had him hold back on this, and had him now miss out on an opportunity. Again, I don't know where this opportunity is going, but it's an opportunity nonetheless. And I think oftentimes so many of us miss out on things because of that. I mean, you know, um, there's so many things like that I delay things, I don't do things, or I don't hit it as hard. Like, again, I've talked about this a ton of times. The perfectionist in me holds me back, and obviously that's not helping me get to where I want to be, right? Overthinking things needs to be perfect. And I've been getting a lot better at sort of being like, doesn't need to be, there's no such thing as perfect. Do I enjoy it? Do I like it? Yes. So keep it moving. Like, stop slowing your progress down because you're sitting here. Because oftentimes what happens with the perfectionist part is I'm not even looking at it from the lens of like, I don't like how this sounds, or what this looks like, or whatever it might be. I'm looking at it through the lens of, well, what's this person going to say? What's this person going to think of it? And that's automatically where you get in your own way and you begin to shoot yourself in the foot, right? And the other thing that resonated with me in talking about this conversation, what I was just reading to you now, some of the notes I was outlining, the people who seem to have everything but still feel empty, right? And that's something I've resonated with, throughout some of the higher points of my career, never feeling like enough, always feeling like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Which again is great. But then in reflecting, it's why sort of I've seen some of the lower points of my life as well, right? The next thing I sort of outlined is the dark side of success, right? And in that is the burnout, is the exhaustion, the struggling with self-worth, tied to accomplishments, feeling like it's never enough, right? Um, I might just make this one long section here because I feel like the anecdotes are working themselves in here. But uh, so many times that I feel less like I'm starving for a compliment on something, right? And what ends up happening, I was thinking about this today, when you begin to set your baseline high, you initially are getting great feedback from people, but then that just becomes the norm, right? And when the great feedback becomes less and less because that's just the expectation people have for you, I think as a high achiever, I begin to then doubt myself, or I begin to find cracks in the situation, or tell myself I don't like it here anymore, or feel lesser than, feel like I'm messing up. I start getting jealous of other people who are getting compliments. And again, that's the darker side of being an overachiever, that sort of reliance of my self-worth based upon the reaction or feedback from others. And it's never enough. That's the problem. Even when you do get that good feedback, you're starving for the next thing, right? It's like you're addicted to it. And it is scary. It's scary because I think it's easy, it's scary when you don't have a real villain. And what I mean by that is it's easy to be frustrated and angry and sort of not fulfilled and feeling empty when you're like broke or you're struggling and you're grinding it out each and every day. But it like makes sense, right? It's like, okay, of course I'm not feeling happy and fulfilled. It's like I'm, you know, not financially where I want to be. Every day is a struggle. Every week I'm living check to check. Like that makes sense. But then when you begin to crawl out of that and you do have the accolades to fall back on and you do have some sort of stability in your life and you're like, fuck, I'm still not happy. That's when it begins to get incredibly dark because then there's this hopeless feeling of, wow, none of it matters. I've sacrificed so much. And it's like the happiness is just always, just a bit out of reach, right? It's like the horse chasing the carrot. And I think that's why you could see so many like celebrities and people of stature and rich people, they'll have it all only to lose it or only to go through incredibly dark periods because I think there's something incredibly disorienting about achieving things that you wanted to achieve only to realize that they are not really what make you happy or they alone don't provide happiness. And again, I mean that's corny as I hate these stupid corny quotes, but like the idea of happiness being an inside job, right? And the idea that you need to celebrate from time to time, right? And you need to allow yourself to be happy, to be satisfied, to say, hey, job well done. You need to take a moment to just chill out and be like, hey, we're doing it. And you can't be addicted to these gigantic moments or explosions. And I know I say that all the time, but that's sort of the reality, right? You can't have this reliance, and you have to recognize that there has to be some sort of balance where you can turn that on and off, where you can just be satisfied for a minute, right? And you can allow yourself to just be happy with what you've done and where you are. And you can be content while still being driven. And I think there's a lot within that. Um, and it's the idea of sort of reframing success, I think, to a degree, right? And I want to get into that and a couple other things. I think I'll pause here. We'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I want to kind of get back to the idea of like reframing success for joy. And the idea that your success doesn't need to come at the expense of your happiness, right? And I think you can be present in the moments and the small wins. And I'm going to share something because it's on my mind today because I have a group text with a bunch of my friends. And it's a group text of guys that I've known through like the industry, but we all became pretty close. And um, we would travel a lot together. Like, for years, we would always go to Miami during the same time. We would also go to Vegas during the same time. It just was a consistent thing we used to do. And they texted some pictures, I guess, that must have popped up on their, like, whatever timeline or Facebook how does those memories. And it was a trip when we all went to Vegas. And it was my first time. I was actually brought out there to DJ for the iHeart Festival and do a bunch of stuff. And it was just one of those trips where, we had all the right connections and we were like living the fucking dream, right? Living the dream. Like we were, and granted, it's like, all right, in the grand scheme of life, this isn't that big of a deal. But for some guys in their 20s who are not rich by any means, I think I was still making $15 an hour at that time. We were doing Vegas on other people's dimes, record labels and such, as like ballers. Like we were at the biggest clubs in Vegas. We were in the DJ booth, and there was, free drinks flowing, and you're brushing elbows with your celebrity crush, and like all this silly little nonsense things. And granted, these things don't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. Again, I don't want to sound super shallow, but with that said, not everything has to be that deep. It was a fun time. It was a fun weekend, right? But I'm looking at like the pictures and the conversations, and I'm reflecting on that moment, and this particular trip haunts me. And it's silly, but it does. Because I didn't allow myself to sort of let my guard down to just enjoy the moment, right? I didn't have to work that night. I was DJing. I had done my earlier DJ gig during the day. I wasn't DJing again until the following afternoon. So this was purely sort of hanging out. Yeah, you're making connections with industry people. We're having some drinks. We're hanging out, blah, blah, blah. But I really was like, I could have allowed myself to chill. And I didn't. I remember leaving the spot we were at to go like support some other DJ who was DJing some other spot, and leaving knowing like all my friends who stayed behind, because it was literally turning into like the most epic night one could imagine ever. I won't go into details, but it was the most, for a bunch of single guys, again, who none of us had money whatsoever or status. It was just like the stars aligned, and every stupid dream you had as a single 20-something-year-old man was there for you. And again, in retrospect, it's like that part's not a big deal, but I think about it as like you didn't appreciate that moment. You kept going into work mode even in times that didn't need to be work mode. Like I didn't know how to turn it off, and I always kept prolonging the joy. I told myself, "Oh, put in the work, keep putting in the work, don't get caught up. This is, you'll enjoy this at some point down the line when you're the headliner," type of thing, right? And while I love that I'm was thinking so big, and I appreciate the fact that I had so much discipline at an age and at a time and in a situation where many people wouldn't have, I do think I took it too far. And that's just an example, but I think the thing I didn't recognize, and now that I do as I'm older, life goes by quickly. Moments are fleeting. You're never going to have that exact moment again. And yeah, you could have a better time. You could have whatever. Like there could be better moments ahead. Whatever it might be. But moments are fleeting. They're just that, right? The reality is that crew of friends, collectively, all of us, we never took a trip like that again. Some of us did, but not all of us together in that manner. There was literally like 15 to 20 of us rolling up like deep. Like we're talking about multiple, like it was just like a fucking a frat party on wheels, but it was like just fun times. And I had earned that by all the work I had put in before, right? And I didn't allow myself to be present and recognize how special of a moment that was and how I would never have that moment back because I was too concerned with what everything meant and, trying to squeeze the most opportunity of every little thing. And I struggle with it because it's like, oh, well, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan would make the same decisions I made. But I also look at people like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, and I'm like, man, particularly Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or something, I'm like, these guys don't strike me as people who still live incredibly fulfilled lives. And I've talked about this a million one time, like a broken record, but I'm like, what if I'm like great adjacent, but that means I get to live life a little bit better, a little bit happier, have better personal relationships? Wouldn't I say that that is a bit more successful than another ring, another championship? And I guess what I'm getting at when I have these sort of internal or existential conversations is recognizing and viewing success from the larger vantage point of life rather than a moment in my life, right? We can stay with the sports analogy. A football player's playing career is only really a small part of their life in terms of the amount of years versus, hopefully the long life they get to live. Like they're probably a professional football player for 10 years if they're lucky, right? Maybe longer for some, but on average, let's say. In the grand scheme of life, if they live to be 80, that's a pretty small window or a pretty small portion of their life in terms of time. And I guess what I'm looking at is if you never allow yourself, if you set up your life where everything goes into that one thing, like relentlessly, at the expense of, in this analogy, at the expense of the other 70 years of your life, can you really look back on your time spent on this earth and say that it was a success? You sacrificed the majority of your life for a very small window of time. And again, I think the goalpost is different for all of us, but I'm beginning to look at it in those terms. And again, trying to find a healthy balance, but not being so rigid in it all. Even now, I'm planning out some stuff for the summer and I'm planning on like some interesting events that I'm trying to put together and parties and stuff like that. In the grand scheme of what I want to do, these are not things that are necessarily going to lead me to what I'm hoping to do. But they are moments that I feel like I'll be able to enjoy. They're things that I'm feeling excited about. And I want to give myself that, you know, even if it financially it's not moving the needle much for me. When it comes to my soul, it gives me something, right? When it comes to filling up my cup, it gives me something. Like I had thrown a party for my birthday this last weekend. Uh and I've talked about this party con fuego. It's like me and a bunch of my DJ buddies. I could have taken a gig, made a lot more money, and not had the pressure or the stress of throwing a party and bringing people out and planning it and coordinating 5 other DJs and a photographer and videographers and all these different things. And of another venue all and coordinating with the venue. I could have saved myself all of that stress and got paid more money by just DJing the regular spots I would DJ at. But for me, this was in my heart, in my soul, an amazing opportunity to just do something fun for myself, to be in community and be a part of something. And that filled up my cup, right? More so than money in this case. And that's a success to me. And I don't know if an older programming version of me would have been as open to that, right? Because he would have been too focused on the money aspect of it or bigger gig or whatever it might be. And I don't know, those are just things that I sort of think about here. Um, it's it's focusing on I mean, even your career, it's a small window in time for so many people. And I think we also can't I think it's funny how we often this is what I think a better example than maybe something else should have been like, running around with. We often create goals only for our career and financial situations. Rarely do we, and I include myself, make goals on a personal sense, right? Maybe like you have like physical goals. Oh, I want to lose this much weight, blah, blah, blah. But like, how many people can honestly say, oh, it's a goal for me? When I think of 2025, one of my goals is spend more time with my kids, take more vacations, do that. And there are some people I'm sure who are thinking that way, but I'm looking at my goal list and I'm like, man, there's nothing on there that doesn't involve career. Everything is career oriented and focusing on career wins. And that's not healthy. That's how you get burnt out. That's how you end up feeling miserable and sad even as you achieve all that you want. Because you again, like those the career part is such a small portion of it's a big I mean, listen, it's important and it plays a significant role in comparison to maybe certain other things. But in the grand scheme of it all, man, like there's so much more than just your career wins. And even somebody like me who I get to do what I love and I'm passionate about and like I would do this for fun and I plan on doing this until I, can no longer do it anymore just because I brings me pure joy. But there has to be a balance of it all where it's not my entire life, where I'm okay with going out and just hanging out or resting when I need to. And I don't need to feel like because what I do is every waking moment that I have open that is not occupied by something, I feel like I have to fill it with something work related. Literally, I work until about 9 o'clock at night. And that's like something a therapist recommended that you have to make a regiment where you have a stopping time. And I gave myself 9 o'clock at night because I would literally used to work until I would basically be falling asleep on a desk. But it's recognizing there's more than just like the the wins of a career essentially. And I hope I'm kind of like getting to something with something like even in this book they talk about reframing, right? Um, and I guess that's something I've been doing recently. I was having like a mental conversation with myself on I think it was yesterday where it was like 4 or 5 o'clock and I was just exhausted and I had planned on doing some other crazy big adventure. Um, and I sort of stopped myself. I was like, hold on a second. Because I was beginning to beat myself up, guilting myself because I ended up like, just sort of like uh making food and being just like, all right, I can't do anything right now. I'm just exhausted. And I had to slow myself down because the negative thoughts crept up about being lazy and all these different things. And I had to have that conversation where I began to like check those thoughts and remind myself, wait, what's the reality here? You worked all weekend. You were running on about 3 hours of sleep both Saturday and Sunday. You DJ'd Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday you went and hung out with your parents, because they wanted to have dinner with you for your birthday. Yeah, obviously you're exhausted and you're tired. You've been going at this 7 days straight on very limited resources as far as sleep and rest. So you're allowed to not work until 9 o'clock at night tonight because you have worked your ass off for 7 days straight. And on top of that, even on this day where you're beating yourself up, you sent out you did so much shit in regards to the goals that you had in mind. Yeah, you didn't achieve everything off your to-do list, but you went in on a lot of the shit that you needed to get done. Like, it's still a success. It was still a successful day, even if you're looking at it as you only put in a half day's work. Like, relax. You're a human being. You're allowed to be tired. And that's a positive sort of reframe I gave myself where I was talking about check the facts. Am I going off of a week of like excellent sleep and was barely doing anything and then now I'm really just being lazy? I'm just not wanting to do it. Or was I really burning the candle at both ends and now I need to slow down and like recalibrate and refresh in order to, not sabotage the rest of my week or to collapse out of, just exhaustion and lack of care. Right. And me slowing down and not allowing the toxic overachiever to be the one driving the car. I was able to say, hold on, you've done a lot. You need this rest here. Let's get a good night's sleep and we'll hit it Tuesday as hard as we always normally do. But you can stop here, give yourself some time to just relax on the couch, unwind, not be on your computer doing something, watch a documentary, whatever. Get your mind inspired and reinvigorated. And that's what I did. And that is, I think, the healthy sort of reframes that we have to have with ourselves, those conversations. And that, again, is something new for me. Before that, I would have beat the shit out of myself. I would have called myself lazy. I would have told myself I didn't want it bad enough. And I would have, tried to just keep pushing myself to the point of where I'm just walking around as a depressed zombie. And because the reality is I woke up today, I felt incredibly inspired. I felt refreshed. I felt clear. And I've, tackled some shit that like I had no interest in tackling, but I knew had to get done. And I was able to do it. But it's because I gave myself the leniency to kind of refresh and relax for a second. I didn't give into that toxic overachiever, you know? Um, and we'll touch on some practical takeaways that I think like actionable steps to kind of help get us in a better mindset. But we'll take a quick break here and then we'll be right back.
Time for conclusions soon.
Last thing I want to end on is some like takeaways, some actionable steps. I always talk about this a lot, but I think setting boundaries to protect your peace is always a healthy sort of thing to do. Healthy practice. Ironically I'm saying that and I'm about to give an example of a rule that I just broke, but I've like switched off of like I don't do meetings after like normal business hours. Even if I'm working on stuff later at night, I try to avoid, doing anything with other people after a certain time because it's like that's just my like uh my sort of stream of conscious or my flow state time later at night if I'm working on something. Usually I'm doing my creative stuff at night. I'm laughing because I just broke that rule. I have a meeting tomorrow night, but just something to kind of whatever. I had to do it just to stop a back and forth that I've been going on and on with about scheduling. I was just like, fuck it, I'll do tomorrow night. But yeah, so that's an example. I usually set boundaries. I'm like, after a certain time, sorry, I'm not available. Even if technically I am available, just to like mentally, I'm not available. I'm checked out at that point. I'm done with like, sitting through a meeting or something that I don't necessarily feel like doing. Another thing is celebrating your small wins instead of chasing perfection. I've been doing this a lot lately. I have a to-do list and I celebrate even on the days that I don't check off everything on the day's to-do list. I've kind of gotten over that. I'll now, as I'm like washing up and getting ready for bed, I'll go through all the stuff that I did do and remind myself of why that is a big deal or why it's something to celebrate or how it's contributing to the overall goal that I have. And that's been super helpful. Or like I go to bed feeling really good about myself. Um, Another one is focusing on purpose and passion rather than validation. I think this is a tough one, when it comes to external validation and things like that. But, you know, uh, even for me, as like now getting back into making music, I'm not doing it with the intention of like who's gonna like it or what artist might play it, what DJ might play it. I'm just doing shit that I like and ideas that I find to be cool and putting it out there, and I don't put anything out there yet, but you know, finishing ideas and just working on them because I like them and because they make me feel good, and not worrying about everything else, which I feel like I used to back in the day. Um, Another thing is I'd say prioritizing mental health and self care, which is something I just talked about when it comes to like I prioritize my rest because I knew that the exhaustion was only gonna hurt and affect my mental health in a negative manner. Um, and I think little things like that, sort of having honest conversations with yourself about where you are and if you need that break, and being okay with giving it to yourself. And last thing I'd say is like, really having a clear idea on what happiness looks like for you. You know, I think I think that's uh an important thing to be aware of always having that in the back of your head, that North Star that I talk about a lot of like, you know, this is the the thing that really drives me in this life, or being aware of like the big picture. I really can't put it in any other way. The bigger picture of like what is the real meaning of my life? What meaning am I giving it, right? And having that be the umbrella that everything else falls under, right? I think that is probably part of the key as well. Again, to me, it's like I look at it when I began to get really clear on like what type of job I wanted, and the situation I wanted and all these things. It then made it very easy to say no to things that didn't align with that, and that weren't gonna provide me long term happiness. And it made it very clear to see what was actually available out there for me, and guides the decisions that I make each and every day. But it's like again having that overarching umbrella that everything else sort of falls under, being very self aware and very much in line with that, and try to live as much in tune with that idea of what makes you happy, every minute of every day. And obviously, it's never gonna be perfect, but having that in the back of your head allows you to make better decisions, and I think, um, as a result, allows you to get far closer to that happiness than if you didn't have it defined. And that's sort of the best, I guess, piece of advice that I could give on everything. Um, and I hope that that was sort of helpful for anybody who kind of finds it difficult to get the balance going. I think, listen, in life, to get what you want, you're gonna have to sacrifice. You're gonna have to bust your ass. But um, as I love the driving example that I think I've used a lot, but just like you cannot always have your foot on the gas when driving on the road, or you will crash. It's the same thing in life. There are times where you have to be, driving with the pedal down, and you have the opportunity to do so on the highway or something like that. But there are also going to be times where you get off that highway and you have to slow down and, abide by all that's going on around you, and think safely in that manner, right? And I think that's an analogy for how we have to treat ourselves, our mind, our body, and recognize that like our body and mind weren't designed to just have pedal to the floor 100 miles an hour all day every day. It's impossible, and the more you do it will only eventually become a detriment to your ability to produce high quality work. Essentially, I think you have to have that balance. And I know for me, my mental health, my depression, my anxiety is only exacerbated when I'm not taking care of myself, and giving myself the breaks and the grace needed. Um, you know, and I know that the times where I do, like I said yesterday, allow myself to just be like, all right, I think we're good for today, and set myself up to have a good night's rest. When I get up the next day, I feel far more inspired, and therefore I'm far more energized to get a lot more done, for the rest of the week. Because I gave myself that much needed little break or um, just sort of peace of mind in not being so regimented to like, you have to pull a 12-hour day every day. And again, it's balance. We can also, on the flip side of that, tell ourselves that we deserve this, and even though we do, it's not what we need to be doing. So you have to be very self-aware and very disciplined with yourself, I think, in both having compassion but also at the same time um, holding yourself accountable. And it's a fine line right there, and you are the only one who really knows what the real reality is, and what you need to give your body and your mind, and what you have to do is just listen to your body and your mind and see what it's telling you. And that's it, man. Hope this was helpful. I love having these sort of conversations with myself, just to remind myself of like the greater picture, the bigger picture, to slow down every once in a while. I feel like I need that reminder. So hopefully this was something that resonated for some of y'all. We'll be back on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Life is wild. There'll be a lot to talk about. Until then, though, stay safe, stay sane, if you will. And I will talk to you soon. Peace.